So as you know, I chose Anheuser-Busch as my company to do the strategic plan for. And before I get a little too far into it, I want to tell you a little bit about myself and why I chose it. As most of you know, I joined the military 8 years ago. And in doing so, I've gotten to travel the world a lot. So I've been to Germany, Bulgaria, Romania, El Salvador, and quite a few states as well. And that's kind of allowed me to try a lot of beers. Let's be honest. I probably have drank over 100 beers for sure. Different variations at least. So with that being said, let's jump right into the presentation. I want to read this verbatim because this is pretty interesting. It's a history of Anheuser-Busch. So Adolphus Busch was born in 1839, the second youngest of 22 children. At age 18, he made his way to St. Louis via New Orleans and the Mississippi River. Adolphus began working as a clerk on the riverfront, and by the time he was 21, he had a partnership in a brewing supply business. It was through this enterprise that Adolphus Busch met Eberhard Anheuser, and soon Adolphus was introduced to Eberhard's daughter, Lily. Good old love story, right? In 1861, Adolphus Busch and Lily Anheuser were married, and shortly after that, Adolphus went to work with his father-in-law, He later purchased half of the ownership in the brewery, becoming a partner. By the mid-1800s, there were more than 50 breweries in the St. Louis area. Business was a boom. At that time, most beer in the U.S. was sold in the community in which it was brewed. Adolphus was determined to create a brand that would transcend the tradition of local brews and appeal to the tastes of many different people. In 1876, he and his friend Carl Conrad created an American-style lager beer that succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. Adolphus coined the label Budweiser, a name that would appeal to German immigrants like himself, yet could be easily pronounced by Americans. Budweiser was a success and eventually became the company's flagship brand. And pretty well, what most of y'all probably know Anheuser-Busch for is Budweiser or Bud Light and the many variations therein. Okay, so when I chose this project, I thought I knew a lot about beer. I was completely wrong. Because the hierarchy of who owns what brand is very difficult to grasp. That's why I threw this in here before we get too far ahead. So you see here's our big boy, and that's when they merged with InBev. They become Anheuser-Busch InBev. So in October 2016, there was something known as the mega merger in the beer industry. That's when SAB Miller joined forces with Anheuser-Busch. Effectively, Anheuser-Busch bought them out for $101 billion. And here's a very neat thing to look at right here. It's Miller, SAB Miller. They diverted the Miller, and it was bought by Molson Coors for $12 billion. Therefore, creating Miller Coors. All right. During this is going to be the microenvironmental analysis. We're going to evaluate the external, which will include industry, markets, competition, supplier, and the internal, which will be resources and preferences. Let's go ahead and dive right on into the external. So the industry, anybody thirsty now? Maybe a little thirsty, but so the beer industry is pretty large, and it creates 1.75 million jobs in the U.S. That's huge. You could be a farmer for Anheuser-Busch, farming hops. You could be working distribution. You could be a brewer. There's tons of jobs in the field. And it's also important for our economy because, of course, a lot of this is taxed. So I threw up this metric, and this is kind of a photo of what you could see at your local gas station. So you got, here's the two big competitors here. You got Miller and Coors here, and you got the Bud products here. But one thing I wanted to point out, this is I think a 6-year metric of where you see the market share for Anheuser-Busch kind of dropped, what is that, 5%, around 4 point something, and Miller Coors the same. But here's the big thing I wanted to point out from this, all other brewers and importers. So they rose 7.7%. That's huge, and that's going to be kind of an underlying theme during my presentation. So values. This was pulled straight from Anheuser-Busch's site, and this is their values. Brewing goodness, we're a company of dreamers, leaders, thinkers, and doers who roll up their sleeves and work hard to create not only great beers and engaging experiences, but also a better world. We take ownership for the impact our actions have on this world. We dream of a better world, one that is safer because all people drink responsibly. And this is one of their big things they're having now, drink responsibly at the end of their commercials and whatnot. A world that's cleaner, greener, and sustainable for future generations. A world where we help to make the communities we live in stronger for everyone. Every member of our team, employees, wholesalers, retailers, and partners, share a commitment to reducing our environmental impact, preserving resources, and being a strong community partner. Because it's our children, our neighborhoods, our roads, and our planet, it's our responsibility. So from here you see they're taking the green initiative. And that's very important moving forward. All right, so let's get into a little bit of strategy. So this is 2013 census, and the way that this map works, of course, the darker the area, the more people per square mile. So you see we're kind of heavily populated in California, and then especially Northeast. Getting into that, I'm going to go into where their breweries are placed. And I believe they looked at probably a map similar to this to kind of, you see the correlation here, and then this serves a lot of these lighter areas. And when I first saw this map, I was like, well, why do they have so many people in the Northeast? Breweries at least. That's because there's a ton of people there. So that was very strategic on their part so they can deliver the freshest product. All right, getting into the market. Anheuser-Busch, this is what was huge for me. They own so many brands. You hear a lot of people say, I don't like Anheuser-Busch. They'll say, excuse me, what do they drink? My father, he said, I drink Mick Ultra. I don't like Anheuser-Busch. Mick Ultra is a brand within the Anheuser-Busch dynasty. So I won't stay on this too long, but there's a lot of popular brands. Landshark, Budweiser, of course, Stella Artois, Mick Ultra, Michelob Light. Shock Top's a big one. I also read a statistic. Shock Top is kind of known as a craft brew, right? Well, 75% of the people that drink it do not know that Anheuser-Busch owns it. They think that they're drinking some kind of private brew. All right, competition. This is the big part. So, as we know, Miller Coors is the huge competitor to Budweiser or Anheuser-Busch. But don't forget about the craft brewers. They're very, very important. So, just to kind of look at Miller Coors a little, excuse me, I can't think of my vocabulary right now. In depth. Here you got your Coors Light, Miller, some of the things you like to think of. They also have Red's Apple Ale, I believe, which Anheuser-Busch countered with the creation of Johnny Appleseed, which are both hard ciders. So both of them have this wide product, this vast differentiation. There's tons of brands. So my thing is, Miller Coors is always going to have a real strong hold on the market, same as Anheuser-Busch. So I'm not going to target them as much because they got a lot of the same similar products. It's more brand loyalty when it comes between drinking one or the other. So I'm in the military with a guy named Kevin Porter. He looks super happy there, right? He doesn't like going to work. So I asked him, he works for Ajax, based out of Clarksville, distributing Miller Coors products. So I asked him kind of how business was going and everything. So, sweet Facebook Messenger. He says, I asked him a prayer statement, and I asked him, like I said, how things were going. He said, hello, I'm Kevin Porter, and I work in distribution for Miller Coors. Our distribution network covers most of Northwest Tennessee. I've noticed that AB InBev, or Anheuser-Busch, they're synonymous, and Miller Coors are still the two top dogs in the beer industry in this region. Anheuser-Busch tends to beat us in light beer popularity, but we found our stride delivering craft brews, or the brews perceived as craft. Since the law passed in Tennessee, he says in March, that's incorrect, it was in January of 2017, legalizing the distribution of high gravity up to 10.2% in Tennessee now. We've been doing really well in that area too. So moving forward, this was a very interesting metric that I found on the craft. They're calling it the craft beer revolution. And how many of you guys have had a craft beer? You got one. How many of you guys are lying about not having a craft beer? So a lot of us have had beer in here, and it's, as you see, of course, during the recession, it's probably not the best time to open business, but business is booming. It's been just grown exponentially in the past 5 years. So in 2015, the number of breweries soared to 4,144. This is in the U.S. alone, a 36% increase from the previous year. So right here. And since 2011, or in a 5-year period, the number of breweries have increased by 252%. So I had a friend, he lives in Georgia, and he worked at a liquor store, but have any of y'all lived out of state before? All y'all out of state? So y'all know that liquor stores carry beer in other states. They got beer, wine, liquor. It's all, I call it a party store. But he worked there for 3 years, and his main duty, he was a craft beer salesman, and I asked him to prepare a statement, basically a video interview of him talking about the effects the craft beer revolution has had on Georgia. Here you go, I'll let him steal the show.
Hi, my name is Robbie Kudela, and I worked at Cumming Beverage Mart as a craft beer salesman for over 3 years. I have seen the effects of the craft beer revolution firsthand. During my 3-year employment at Cumming Beverage Mart, I noticed quite a massive pivot away from the macro breweries such as Budweiser and Miller Lite for smaller batch craft brews. At the beginning, about 70% of people would reach for their usuals. By the end of my employment, our shelves were overflowing with different varieties of craft brews from around the world. It seemed like every week there was dozens and dozens of new breweries coming in. For the longest time, there wasn't much craft beer available here in the state of Georgia. After about 20 years, there was only 2 breweries in the state, Terrapin and Sweetwater. Skipping forward to today, there are now over 40 different craft breweries just in Georgia alone. Customers started to value quality over quantity. To try and combat this loss of revenue, companies like Miller Coors and AB InBev decided to start investing in acquiring these smaller local breweries in order to gain profit sharing. This can be seen in the Miller Coors acquisition of Terrapin Beer Company here in Athens, Georgia just last year. While some consumers speculate these investments and acquisitions will diminish the quality of the product, it's actually very mutually beneficial. By being invested in or acquired, these smaller craft breweries gain access to an extremely vast distribution line. This means they can sell their products in new markets, but this also means that craft breweries can grow while macro breweries get to sustain their already massive hold on the empire. With that being said, I see the craft beer market continuing to grow in size and popularity. Therefore, it will take a larger portion of the beer market.
All right. Awesome. So Robbie worked in Cumming, Georgia, which is about 25 minutes north of Atlanta, so effectively central Georgia. And I'd like to point out that he said for about 20 years ago, there was only 2 breweries in the state of Georgia. Now there's over 40. And I think those 38 were erected in the last 7 years, so it's a pretty big deal. So I've also developed a strategy on how to mitigate the damage from the craft beer boom. So what does Anheuser-Busch need to do? They need to create their own craft brands. Buy craft breweries that are willing to sell out. And the big one, I think, is controlled distribution. So, as Robbie said, Terrapin was effectively bought out by Miller Coors so they can push their product. So that's a big deal, is these smaller microbreweries don't have the capital to move their product. Also, merge to control the market, which I hinted on earlier due to the mega merger in October of 2016 between SAB Miller and AB InBev. All right, supplier. Have any of y'all heard of this? Elk Mountain Farms. It's up in Idaho. Me either. But it's pretty cool. I was reading about it. Elk Mountain is 10 miles from the Canadian border, which I find that interesting because I don't know much about farming, but I think it would be kind of cold there, right? So Elk Mountain is the largest hot farm in the world, not just the U.S. They have 1,800 acres of hops. Anheuser-Busch's acquisition of Goose Island, which was a microbrewery before, paved the way for the creation of new hop variations. Why is this important? Differentiation. They're going to be able to create new aromatic hops to brew newer beers. The Elk Mountain team grows 40 to 50 hop variations now. All right, now we're going on to the internal, the fun stuff. So the resources. Here's a financial statement from 2015. I couldn't find 16. This is called Consolidated Statement of Financial Position, or effectively the balance sheet. You'll see that things are pretty well about the same between 2015 and 14, so I'm not going to talk too terribly much on it. We'll move on to the consolidated cash flow statement. You'll see kind of the same thing here, but I want you to notice that how they kind of dropped here on cash flow. And I think a lot of that's due to the craft breweries taking more of that market share. They're selling less beer. So from a lot of what I read is the beer is they're selling just about the same amount of beer every year, but the difference is who's buying what beer. So the beer industry isn't effectively booming. We're not buying more beer, we're buying different beer. All right, preferences. So this is the senior management in North America. I'm not going to try to pronounce that, but headed by Castro Neves. I'm not sure. President, CEO. Now, what I noticed in reading these profiles is, you see a lot of VP of people, VP marketing, VP. So, of all these people, all of them have at least 10 plus years in the organization, except for one, and that's Philippe, the president of the high-end business unit. This guy came over, he was working for building businesses on 3 different continents, so I think they hit a home run getting this guy. Here is, I got this on February 13th, quote for the stock, and staying with my theme of craft brewery, you see over the past 5 years, we've been rising. I think I checked it yesterday, it was almost 109. Here it's 106.82. But you see there's been a big fall here. And if I was a stockholder, I would be a little scared. But I think that's got a lot to do with the craft breweries taking more of the market share. Here's the work site in case you guys want to look up any of my information. There's a ton of it. Thanks a lot, everybody.